rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events, this is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. I guess Army choked. Navy beat Army today. I didn't watch the show or watch the game. I'm I've sort of sworn off of sports. I mean, ever since they started going woke, I can't do it. But apparently, Army lost. So too bad, Army. Maybe next year. I do understand though that Daniel Penny was there with J.D. Vance as his guest, and that kind of thing. So plus. There was a photo running around about J.D. Vance drinking a beer. And they were, obviously this is a lefty who posted it. But the lefties were all like, oh, and all you guys were talking about Kamala and her wine. Here he is drinking a beer. Except there's only one problem. We haven't seen J.D. Vance drunk on camera. Anyway. Yeah, so who cares? I mean, who really cares? Who really cares about Kamala? Kamala could be a lush for all I care. She's out. She's gone. She's hopefully will never grace the presence of public life ever again and will fade off into historical obscurity forever. Yeah. So anyway. Whatever. I'm so done with some of these. I don't even want to talk necessarily about Joe Biden anymore, really, because, I mean, that guy he was bad while he was in office. He's even worse now at the fact that he's pretty much decided that he's hanging it up. He's hanging up his skates. He's got short timer syndrome. He's on his way out. He just wants nothing to do with what's going on. And, yeah, so. Whatever. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead and get things started off. Tonight, we have Judge Wild leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mine, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one like me. And oh, Mark over on Facebook. He says, I drink about 6 beers a year and the VA has me listed as an alcoholic. Well, I wonder what they would think about me. Anyway, every Wednesday and Saturday night. Oh, it's like clockwork. It happens. Anyway. Oh, you guys are killing me. Anyway, all right, so let's get back to where we were. If you don't mind, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one, and make sure you put your hand over your heart and join in with Judge Wild and the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh yeah, hurrah! All right.
Thank you for submitting that, Judge Wild. If you haven't checked out his show, you probably should. It's short, lots of snark, great stuff. He's got a couple different things. He transmits, I think, like 3 or 4 times a day for different reasons. But anyway, you could check all his stuff out on Rumble. But if you would like to hear your rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance done here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself performing the Pledge of Allegiance in your style. And then, of course, make sure that you attach that to an email. You can attach it digitally, which is the best way to do it. Or if you really have to, you can use a paperclip, stapler, super glue, cyanoacrylate. Anyway, so just take that and attach it to an email and send it to the email address fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. Yeah, Amy's like saying glue. Anyway, all right. My headliner promotion, which of course is theflagshirt.com. I'm wearing one right now. I'm wearing a fantastic one of their products. As always, this is one of the men's cotton polo shirts that they have. Very patriotic. This one here is the plain, I think it's, well, I call it plain, but it's the We the People. There's nothing really for it other than the We the People Constitution written on it. But anyway, if you head on over to theflagshirt.com, they have got a fantastic weekend sale. It is a patriotic weekend sale going on right now where they have up to 50% off select patriotic gear. It's a veteran-owned, veteran-run organization, so you should at least check it out. Go to theflagshirt.com. That's theflagshirt, all one word, .com. And this weekend and this weekend only, you can get up to 50% off select patriotic gear by shopping this weekend at theflagshirt.com. As always, they have free shipping on orders over $75 or more. So if you buy $75 worth or more of their gear, they will give you free shipping. But I know that some people can't do that. And so I'm going to help you out. If you don't want to, if you can't or don't want to get $75 of their gear to get that free shipping, just head on over to flagshirt.americanperspective.online. That's flagshirt.americanperspective.online. And you can get a coupon code that you can enter in at checkout in the promo code box at theflagshirt.com and get $5 off your order. Go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online, grab that coupon code, and head on over to theflagshirt.com, enter that code in the promo box at checkout, and get yourself $5 off your order at theflagshirt.com. Go to theflagshirt.com and get yourself patriotized. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get things started off right. I got a new whiskey for you tonight. This one, Mrs. Whiskey brought home yesterday. She actually brought it home during the show, set it on my desk, and I got to admit, I was a little distracted, to say the least. But this one's a new one for me anyway. It's Kentucky Best whiskey. It's been aged 4 years. I don't know if Bonnie is in the chat or not. I haven't really noticed. I think she is off doing her thing, but there it is. It's Kentucky Best whiskey, and it's in the glass right now. This is the first try at it, and I am drinking out of the That's What I Do. I drink and I know things glass. Of course, with the stones, because it takes stones to drink with me. So here we go. First taste. Oh. It's a little rough on the finish. But otherwise not bad. Mark, I think Hennessy is cognac, not whiskey. Well, anyway. All right. Oh, yes. 3 Chevy reminded me that Bonnie is watching her cats. So thank goodness she doesn't have to see me drink this. Because she's not, she is very particular about her bourbon. I'll tell you that much. Anyway. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get into the first segment of the show, which is, of course, On This Day in American History. And of course, for On This Day in American History, we read from the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. It is chock full. Look at the thickness of that thing. It is chock full of all kinds of information about our historical founding and our country. Just fantastic daily numbers or daily notes and everything else. Plus, it has a bunch of information in between the months. So, you get, this book is just fantastic. It might even be a good Christmas gift for a good patriot out there who's really interested in this stuff. You can find it on Amazon or pretty much any place where books are sold. And it's basically daily readings on America. But today is December 14th, and December 14th we have a quote. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. On December 14th, 1799, George Washington died at Mount Vernon at age 67. 2 days after being caught out in sleet and snow while riding over his farms. Congress asked Virginia statesman Henry, known as Light Horse Harry, Lee, to eulogize the nation's hero. Lee's words about his friend have endured for over 2 centuries. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. He was second to none in the humble and endearing scenes of private life. Pious, just, humane, temperate, and sincere, uniform, dignified, and commanding, his example was as edifying to all around him, as were the effects of that example lasting. Correct throughout, vice shuddered in his presence, and virtue always felt his fostering hand. The purity of his private character gave effulgence to his public virtues. Such was a man for whom our nation mourns. Fellow Virginian Thomas Jefferson wrote of George Washington's character, "His mind was great and powerful, without being of the very first order. His penetration strong, though not so acute as that of a Newton, Bacon, or Locke. And as far as he saw, no judgment was ever sounder. He was incapable of fear, meeting personal dangers with the calmest unconcern. Perhaps the strongest feature in his character was prudence, never acting until every circumstance, every consideration was maturely weighed. Refraining if he saw a doubt, but once decided, going through with his purpose, whatever obstacles opposed. His integrity was most pure. His justice was most inflexible I have ever known. It may truly be said that never did nature and fortune combine more perfectly to make a great man." That is on this day in American history, where the great general and first president of this great country, George Washington, passed at the age of 67. That man started something when he decided to step down after his second term in office, even though many wanted him to continue being president. He basically said, no, it was time for him to step down and to move on. We are in need and of want of that type of integrity, honor, courage, and ethics today, especially in our statesmen and our representatives. Yeah, like Mark points out. And now Biden's here. Well, how far have we fallen? Holy crap. My gosh, people. Anyway, speaking of fallen, the mainstream media, one in particular, George Stephanopoulos, and ABC have finally come to an agreement of sorts with Donald Trump about his defamation lawsuit against them. So here, and I didn't connect it. There we go. So here, in the Fox News, ABC is apparently needs to pay $15 million to a charitable contribution as a charitable contribution to the Trump Presidential Foundation and Museum, and then they also are supposed to apologize to Donald Trump. So the settlement was publicly filed today, revealing that the two parties have come to an agreement and avoided a costly trial. According to the settlement, I've already told you about that, and additionally, the network itself is going to pay $1 million in Trump attorney fees. So Stephanopoulos and ABC News also had to issue statements of regret as an editor's note at the bottom of a March 10th, 2024 online article about comments made earlier this year that prompted Trump to file the defamation lawsuit. The note itself reads, ABC News and George Stephanopoulos regret statements regarding President Donald Trump made during an interview by George Stephanopoulos with Representative Nancy Mace on ABC News this week. On ABC's This Week on March 10th of 2024. ABC News said the network was pleased to have concluded the case. A spokesperson told Fox News Digital, "We are pleased that the parties have reached an agreement to dismiss the lawsuit on the terms in the court filing." Trump filed the defamation suit against Stephanopoulos after he asserted that Trump was found liable for rape in a civil case during a contentious interview with Representative Nancy Mace last March. After playing a clip of Mace discussing being a victim of rape, Stephanopoulos asked her, "How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony that we just saw?" You've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and two separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape, Stephanopoulos said, alluding to the legal victory by Trump accuser E. Jean Carroll, which, by the way, is still in appeal. Stephanopoulos repeated that claim 10 times during his spat with Mace, despite the fact that a jury actually determined that Trump was liable for sexual abuse, which has a distinct definition under New York law. Now, what's really funny about this, well, not funny as in ha-ha, or maybe necessarily not even funny as in ironic, but what's really funny, to say the least, about this is the fact that ABC and Stephanopoulos had to do this, and the leftist morons that are running around on the socials have all been sitting here and talked about the fact that Trump was a convicted rapist when he is not. I have said multiple times to people on the socials, you cannot call somebody a convicted rapist if they have never been tried in a criminal court and found guilty of the charge of rape. You can't even call them a convicted rapist if they are found liable for rape in a civil court, which Trump was not. regardless of what that judge, that moron of a judge, said in his own opinion after the court case, folks. And this right here just proves it. Now, had this actually gone to trial, and I can guarantee you that if this had actually gone to a civil trial, they would have lost. Okay? They would have lost. So, anyway, the point being is that, and actually the piece here even talks about it, Judge Lewis Kaplan wrote in a later ruling that just because Carol failed to prove rape within the meaning of the New York penal law does not mean that she failed to prove that Mr. Trump, quote unquote, raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape. Well, I hope that Trump goes after that guy. I don't know if he can. But anyway, so initially, Snuffleupagus was defiant in the face of the Donald Trump lawsuit, telling the CBS late night host Stephen Colbert that he wouldn't be cowed out of doing my job because of a threat. Snuffleupagus said, Trump sued me because I used the word rape, even though a judge said that, in fact, that's what happened. We filed a motion to dismiss. But the settlement came after U.S. Magistrate Judge Lisette M. Reed ordered Trump and Snuffleupagus on Friday to sit for depositions next week ahead of the December 24th deadline for the defendants to file a motion for summary judgment in order to avoid the trial. In his lawsuit against Snuffleupagus and ABC, Trump was represented by Florida attorneys Alejandro Brito and Richard Klug. The settlement with ABC was filed in the Southern District of Florida Federal Court, where both parties signed and agreed to the terms. See, this is what needs to happen. I mean, this basically is what needs to happen. These people, they just don't seem to get it. You can't just go and accuse and say something like this about a person. This is defamatory. And it causes all kinds of problems. And personally, I kind of hope that Trump does take, I mean, it would be nice to be able to have an unlimited source of income to be able to go after all of these people for stuff like this. But the fact of the matter is, the summary judgment, regardless of what that moron hack judge decided to say in the opinion piece, he was only found criminally liable for sexual assault by the jury. He was not fined, or civilly liable, not criminally, civilly liable for sexual assault. There's a reason why New York had that definition, had that separated definition. And, yeah, it's just, anyway. So this, by the way, is just a settlement and another in the string of legal victories for Trump and his legal team. So, yeah, anyway. I mean, people need to understand that just because you're in the media, you don't get the right, or you don't have the right to just say whatever it is that you want. There is a consequence. And especially if you're saying that somebody did something when they actually didn't. Because again, in order to be a convicted rapist, or to be considered a rapist, you must be criminally convicted of the crime. He wasn't even found liable for rape. And by the way, like I said, again, it's up at the appeals court. We'll see what happens in the appeals court afterward. But anyway, I tend to get a little upset and a little, okay, saying upset means that I'm actually giving them power, and I don't want to give them power. That's not what I'm after. But I tend to get a little perturbed over the idea that essentially these people can sit here and say that somebody has done something like this, and they can't. and they haven't, that it wasn't actually true. That the truth of the matter is that yes, he was found liable for sexual assault. The court case is not over yet, though. It is in an appeal. And believe it or not, in that particular case, there were so many damn holes. It never should have been found. He never should have been found liable, period. There were so many holes in her story, blatant holes in her story, that he honestly, I mean, a Mack truck could have gone through him. And I've talked about it on this program multiple times with regards to this. So anyway. All right, let's move on to a very, I've kind of been holding off on talking about this story for a couple of different reasons. The first one, of course, being that, being essentially that we don't have all the details. And when you do, I mean, again, it's that whole age-old adage, you know, is it the rush to be first, or is it the rush to be right? And I'm not really rushing to be either or, okay? But it does seem sort of coincidental that there are these unidentified flying aerial vehicles that are unmanned that are appearing over certain sections and certain segments and certain regions of the United States. But now this is also following on, and I'll get to those in just a minute, but this is also following on another slightly disturbing story. This in the Epoch Times, okay, now, okay, before I get into the story, I just want to be clear about this. We are constantly under attack, okay? We are constantly under attack by foreign adversaries, foreign entities that are consistently attempting to hack into our systems and cause issues and troubles and problems within our system. Okay, this is part of the reason, and I can tell you, working in information technology, as I do in my regular job, this is a constant. It never quits. There's always something that needs to be shored up, prevented, blocked, whatever. And this is part of the reason why zero-day vulnerabilities, for those of you that don't know about zero-day vulnerabilities, they're basically a vulnerability that nobody has discovered yet, okay, ideally. And if they have discovered them, there hasn't been a remedy or a fix for yet. And that's why they call them 0 days, meaning that it's a vulnerability that can occur today. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we do have an aging infrastructure because for whatever reason, right or wrong, organizations, and especially the government in particular, is loath to spend a whole bunch of money in order for them to update, correct, resolve, remedy these systems. Okay. So all of that being the case, this story came out, and of course, being in the telecommunications industry too, because again, that's what information technology is part of telecommunications. This particular story caught my eye, and it makes it for a little bit of concern. Not that I didn't already have this concern, because I actually did have this concern, quite having this concern for sure, because I work in it. But that being said, this does lend to an additional concern. Okay. Now, experts, this is in the Epoch Times. This is a top story in the Epoch Times. Experts are urging Congress to do more to stop Chinese state-based hackers that have infiltrated vast swaths of U.S. telecommunications infrastructure. The Senate held a hearing this week in the wake of multiple classified briefings with intelligence leaders about the Salt Typhoon cyber espionage group, which has reportedly maintained access to infrastructure owned and operated by major providers such as Verizon, AT&T, and CenturyLink for years. The United States clearly is still in a very deep cyber deterrence hole with respect to China, and the hole appears to be only getting deeper, said James Mulvenon, Chief Intelligence Officer at Pamir Consulting, during a Senate hearing that occurred on December 11th. Salt Typhoon has engaged in a wide-ranging espionage campaign going back as far as 2022, which doesn't seem like it's all that far, but believe me, that's 2 years worth of information that and access that this group has had in our infrastructure. Anyway, the hackers themselves have used persistent access to telecommunications infrastructure to collect metadata from a large number of customers, including dates, times, and recipients of calls and texts made by an unknown number of Americans. I mean, this is almost as bad as like a credit card breach. The only difference here is that this is somebody's phone calls. There could be personal information during these phone calls and texts and all kinds of stuff that's in here. Anyway, though the total scale of the metadata stolen is not yet known, the hackers also have absconded with actual audio files of calls and content from texts from a small group of users, including, and this is where things get bad, including some at the highest echelons of government. Mulvenon said that the United States should respond more strongly to the attack and hold China's reigning Communist Party to account for its actions. Mulvenon said cyber deterrence comes down to a response policy by Cyber Command and the other elements of the U.S. government in terms of imposing costs on the Chinese side such that it changes their calculus of the expected value of future attacks and intrusions. Now, he added that it's clear from recent events in China, or that China, and frankly, for that measure, Moscow and Tehran, don't feel like they've found America's pain point yet when it comes to cyber in terms of an expected imposed cost or expected actions on the part of U.S. government. Now, here's the thing, okay? Oftentimes what ends up happening is you have to, when performing something like this, you have to do a bit of a trial run. You need to make sure that everything is working as expected before you actually make the attack. So the question here, and you normally would do some sort of a after action analysis or review to determine whether or not your attack was successful and that you were able to gain the information that you were looking for. It doesn't mean that they necessarily got anything on this first run. They could have. I mean, they could have definitely gotten something. But in a targeted attack such as this, it's mainly just these trial runs that are making things, you know, nerve-wracking for the next setup. And so sitting here and looking at these kinds of attacks, all right, they should be cause for concern. And the fact that they were successful and that we know about them too makes you wonder how many more attacks have occurred between the time that we found it and dating all the way back, like they said, all the way back to 2022. Now, back to the piece here. Future Vice President J.D. Vance acknowledged in October that he and President-elect Donald Trump were among those targeted by Salt Typhoon for more severe data theft. The White House had said that Vice President Kamala Harris was also targeted. Vance said that he believes use of an encrypted application prevented the hackers from obtaining his text and calls. The FBI has contacted those whose calls and texts were targeted by the campaign, but officials have left the responsibility of notifying those whose metadata was compromised to the discretion of the telecommunications companies. Folks, this is essentially what happens when you're dealing with technology such as we are. See, we as Americans have been brought up to believe that our privacy is sacrosanct, that our privacy is such that we consistently believe that government entities and businesses are acting within their ethical boundaries in a lot of cases, when in fact they actually aren't. More companies and like ISPs and things like that. And for those that don't know what ISPs are internet service providers. Oftentimes they will actually sell people's data. The idea is that it's anonymized, but that they will sell people's data in order to gain more money. Again, the idea here is that we are raised and told, and oftentimes that because we have a privacy factor here, enshrined in our Constitution in the 4th and 5th Amendments, that we have a privacy challenges, I guess you could say, or a expectation of privacy is a better way to put it. Expectation of privacy, even if we are working with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, in other words, private companies. But the problem here is that that isn't always the case. Now, I'm not saying that private companies don't act in or try to act in ethical manners, but the idea of privacy in today's day and age, where everything, you are a digital number, there is realistically no privacy anymore, with the exception of what's in your brain, at least at this point. Like one of my favorite of Leroy Jethro Gibbs. He's a character on NCIS, that's Naval Criminal Investigative Service, but one of his rules is so true. And it goes like this. In order to keep a secret, tell no one. The second best option is to tell one other person, if you must. There is no third best. So, there you go. But it's not just something like this that is causing a bit of panic and a bit of challenges. See, as technology grows and becomes more capable of doing things, we have things like what's happening over the East Coast, in particular in New Jersey. Now, New Jersey apparently has had dozens of drone sightings that have been reported throughout the state, most often close to military organizations. Okay? And there's a lot of people who are asking questions about this. Some people are trying to determine whether or not the drones are commercial based, whether they are foreign state actors, or whether or not they are just somebody, putting these things up and flying them around for no reason. But I can tell you this much, there's a lot of them. And they are all showing up over New Jersey for the most part. Here, in the Epic Times also, pressure mounts over mysterious New Jersey drones. This is what they know so far. So throughout this week, multiple state and U.S. lawmakers have been calling for more transparency after residents at as well as local elected officials reported seeing drones across New Jersey in recent days. U.S. officials, including the FBI and the White House, have said that the drones don't pose a national security threat. And the Pentagon has denied early claims that they are originating from Iran. So here's the thing, folks. Do you remember that weather balloon? And it flew across the country, came down from Alaska. Come to find out that the United States government knew about it when it entered into the airspace over the Aleutian Islands, and then it came and floated across the entire country of Canada, coming down into the Midwestern United States above Montana and down into Wyoming. And then we found out that rather than it being just a simple weather balloon, it actually had the capability of directional flight, because we were told later on that the thing did several what appeared to be figure eights over sensitive facilities and sites in the upper Midwest. And then we heard that this thing then traveled across the rest of the United States, that the Biden administration had the opportunity to take the thing down early on when it was over unpopulated areas or relatively lightly populated areas, and didn't bother to do so. And then they had to wait for the thing to get all the way across the United States and slide out over, I believe it was South Carolina, where they finally shot the thing down. And what's kind of interesting, though, is that the information that was being sent from that thing, because also, too, we had it confirmed that that balloon had communication capability and was at one time communicating prior to its being shot down. Folks, you add that, and that all, by the way, happened under the Biden administration. You add that with a weak Biden administration, a weak posture in front of the entire world from America. You add to that weather balloon, plus sightings of other weather balloons, some of them being shot down, some of them being legitimate, meaning legitimate amateur radio weather balloons. There was one that was shot down, presumably shot down by planes out of the upper Midwest at one point that were presumably tied or suspected to be tied to an amateur radio group that was doing weather radio experiments and stuff. But the point here is that we are being watched. We're constantly being monitored by foreign adversaries. Drones have been used on the southern border by the cartels. We've heard reports of that from Border Patrol and other residents down along the southern border, that the drones were being used to map out and scout pathways and trails and ways into our country by the coyotes down there. We now have drones that have been popping up around military bases. And by the way, the story that hasn't been told is there have been drone sightings reportedly around other military bases outside of New Jersey as well. They've had them in Virginia, as well as a couple other places too, I've been hearing. So these drone sightings are popping up out of seemingly nowhere. And the challenge, of course, is that if these things are not being tracked by the FAA, as they suggest in this piece, okay, that these drones are actually flying lower than what the FAA actually controls. So for those of you that may not understand, there actually is a section of airspace that the FAA does not control. And it is generally, if I recall correctly, it's generally up to about 5,000 feet. So anything from 0 to about 5,000 feet above ground level is not necessarily restricted airspace. Depending upon where you actually are, because there are places like airfields and some government installations where you actually have no-fly zones. Okay. But the idea here is that there is a section of airspace where these things can actually fly. This is part of where Amazon was using its idea to use drones as a delivery mechanism. Okay. But the point here is that you can have like an ultralight, as an example, that can fly, in that airspace. Okay. But yet it's not being tracked necessarily by, radar or ground radar. And you definitely don't need to have, there are certain planes and things like that are up there as well. And so depending upon what is going on with the activity, because I mean, I even know of like sports planes and things like that, they are not quite all the way, or they're not quite up to the level required by the FAA to have like full radio gear and things like that. Now, ultralights don't necessarily fly at night. No, they don't. Generally speaking, they don't. But I can tell you that, you can fly an ultralight around, and for the most part, and it's not as restrictive as like a regular pilot's license would be. So Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey sent a letter on Friday to President Joe Biden expressing concerns about the drones and asking for help from the federal government in order to decide what's going on here. Also on Friday, New York Governor Kathy Hochul released a statement on social media saying that her office had found no evidence that the unmanned aerial vehicles spotted by New Yorkers this week pose a threat to public safety or national security. She didn't provide details on the investigation either. Meanwhile, officials in Staten Island, New York, held a news conference on the sightings, asking the federal government and the NYPD to take action. Trump is also calling for action as well. And he's calling for action too. He's saying mystery drone sightings all over the country. He said in a post on Truth Social yesterday, "Can this really be happening without our government's knowledge? I don't think so. Let the public know, and now. Otherwise, shoot them down." White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby said that because of various concerns, the government, of course, couldn't just shoot down the drones. The idea of taking something down again, you want to worry about public safety. First of all, we don't have enough conclusions to take that kind of policy action, he said in a Fox News interview on December 13th. He said that assuming the government had more knowledge, you're not going to want to shoot something down where it could hit somebody's house or hurt someone. So the drone sightings have been reported in New Jersey starting in November. The drones were first spotted flying along what's known as the Raritan River, which feeds the Round Valley Reservoir, the state's largest aquifer, located about 50 miles west of New York City. Now, here's the thing, folks. Our water systems, our electrical systems, we have quite a few places and vectors for foreign entities to attack us. And believe it or not, they're not as secure as what you would expect them to be necessarily. I'm not giving away any kind of state secrets here, but we are vulnerable. And we have been vulnerable for a while. And yet now we have a new vector, a 3D vector, meaning we have to watch the skies above these things. This is, excuse me, this is not good. Now, the sightings themselves, according to the piece, soon spread throughout the state, however, including reports of drones near a place called Picatinny Arsenal, which is a military research and manufacturing facility, over Trump's Bedminster golf course. That was according to local officials. Drones have also been recently seen in coastal areas. For an example, Representative Chris Smith, who was a Republican from New Jersey, said this week that he had been told by a Coast Guard officer that over a dozen drones tailed a Coast Guard lifeboat near Barnegat Light and Island Beach State Park in Ocean County, that encounter took place over the weekend. Senator Andy Kim in New Jersey issued several statements on social media about the drones. The senator said that he and another officer, he was patrolling with local police in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, and the senator said that he and that officer that he was with saw multiple drones and that sometimes they were a solid white light while others flashed off red and green. Now, one thing I can tell you at this point, that anything that is in the air at night is supposed to have a anti-collision lights on them, which typically is a flashing white light. And the other thing is that they are supposed to have, just like a boat, they are supposed to have lights that would indicate both port and starboard sides. For those that are not into nautical terms, that would be the left and the right sides of the thing. Okay. Now, previously he did say that the officer tried to get closer with the use of a helicopter, but that the drones would turn off the lights and go dark if it approached. Now, U.S. officials have pretty much been saying, for the most part, that the drones pose no threat. It was a emailed statement. An FBI spokesperson said in an emailed statement to the Epoch Times on Thursday that FBI and DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, believe there is no threat posed by the reported drones, saying that some reports of drones are actually sightings of what is called manned aircraft. And actually, there was another gentleman who I think he's I can't remember. He's a representative from somewhere, but he reported on X that he saw drones, and then somebody came in behind him and was like, no, those are stars in the sky. So what do we have here? We have all kinds of reports of these drones being around. There's some that are reporting that they're, and by the way, some reports of crashes have been coming in as well. And that the crash sites so far have been from, shall we say, non-commercial drone, non-commercial drones, meaning ones that have been purchased retail-wise. Is it possible that we could be looking at just a series of a successful purchasing or a successful marketing campaign, where all these drones are being purchased by people in New Jersey and the surrounding areas? That maybe a particular store actually had a successful marketing campaign and sale, and that all of these drones, or many of the drones that we're hearing and seeing about, could they be early Christmas gifts for people who are trying to play with them? Is that possible as to where this could be coming from? Or is it alternatively, because some of the drones have been reported to be very large drones, such as things like the military type style of drones? Is it possible that maybe we're seeing a mixture of these things? That maybe there is something nefarious going on that's being covered by these retail, shall we say, publicly accessible drones? I don't know. But all of this seems coincidental, considering the fact that this is coming to the end of Biden's term, as well as the beginning of a new era and a new administration. And of course, the challenge here, which is even worse, just like when you have things like what happened with the Watergate scandal, where stuff was covered up, or even JFK, people are starting to question, they're starting to sniff out things of this nature on all of these kinds of things. And so it's really becoming a bit of a conundrum in terms of all this. And then on top of all that, you have somebody like Representative Van Drew, who is a Republican from New Jersey. He warned that the drones could be Iranian in origin, not Chinese, but Iranian. And he's actually calling for more action from the White House here. Now, the lawmaker himself wrote on X, "What we've uncovered is alarming. Drones flying in from the direction of the ocean, possibly linked to what he calls a missing Iranian mothership." He says this is a national security crisis that we cannot ignore. Bring them down now. Now, immediately following that, the Department of Defense said that there's no evidence to suggest that Iran is actually sending the drones. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh told the reporters there's no Iranian ship off the coast of the United States, and there's no so-called mothership launching drones toward the United States. Van Drew immediately responded and said that U.S. officials are lying. He says, "We aren't being told the truth." He said that in a Fox News interview on Thursday. So think about this. And I just want to, I want to kind of put this as more of a question into your minds with regards to the open and honest communication from the federal government under this administration. Okay. Remember what I told you about the Chinese balloon? It was originally picked up over the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. And it was watched and monitored. There was no comment from the federal government at all until the public started noting this balloon, which was described as being the size of a school bus in the sky. Okay. It wasn't until it was over Billings, Montana, and the public actually started noticing it before the federal government even said anything. Now, I'm reminded of a movie quote from the Men in Black, okay? And it kind of fits with stuff like this, which is essentially the idea that the whole case in point for stuff like this is that the public doesn't know about it. All right? That as long as the public does not know about it, that people go about their daily lives without having to worry about anything like this. And I'm also reminded, based on these experiences, because now what we have is essentially a fever for these drones and for these sightings. It's not unlike, in my mind, back in the 50s with the whole Roswell incident. That was reportedly a weather balloon that had come down. The thing is that the more opportunity that people have to sit there and discuss, contemplate, muse, think about whatever, the more the time that people have to mull over these things, the more likely gossip and innuendo and fear starts taking place. Because don't forget, COVID, by the way, was a huge fear-mongering thing. Remember, they were talking about, oh, no, you're fine. It's okay. And then all of a sudden, people started dying because of COVID. And next thing you know, now all of a sudden, it became a fear factor. And we had to stand 6 feet apart. We had to wear masks that were ineffective. We had to, do all kinds of things, including getting a unproven shot. It's the fear factor that seems to be the issue. And what also doesn't help is when you have people who are supposed to know, like John Kirby. John Kirby made a statement the other day, and here in Red State, there's still more on the East Coast saga over the drones with John Kirby doing an about-face. This is reminiscent of, an Anthony Fauci saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We're going to be fine. It's not that big of a deal. And then all of a sudden, well, yeah, you need to stay home. You need to, make sure that that you do more than just wash your hands, stay away from people, so on and so forth. You remember the back and forth flip all the time of him? Yeah. So on Friday, White House, they call him a spokesdroid. That's funny. But White House spokesperson John Kirby appeared on Fox News with a different tune about the ongoing issue of the mysterious drones buzzing about over New Jersey, Maryland, and other East Coast areas. Kirby managed to talk a lot without saying much, which seems to be a requirement to be a spokesman in the Biden administration. And here, let's just take a listen to what John Kirby was talking about.
And you can't say? Can you tell me that?
No, I'm telling you, Martha, I'm telling you, we don't know.
Let me
can't corroborate every single sighting. Some of them we have, not all of them, and we're working hard to do that. We know people are afraid of it. We know people have concerns. We have those same concerns.
Yeah, because they're flying over your house, and it sounds like there are motorcycles landing on your roof. Let me ask you this. One, person who watched this online said they think it's a Pterodynamics Transwing Drone XP4, which is being developed by the U.S. Navy as a recon and logistics drone capable of picking up and dropping off packages between land and moving ships in high seas and winds. They're suggesting it's an American company. We asked the company. They said we can't speculate on the origin of the drones that are flying over New Jersey. So is that an avenue that has been inspected? Is this a private company that is practicing something? And wouldn't they have to clear something with somebody to have this kind of activity?
It could very well be, as I said, these could be commercially developed drones of some kind.
Why not just take one down and figure out what's going on?
Well, the idea of taking something down, again, you want to worry about public safety. First of all, we don't have enough conclusions to take that kind of a policy action. But let's just assume for a minute, Martha, that we did. I mean, you're not going to want to shoot something down where it could hit somebody's house or hurt somebody.
Well, the Coast Guard says that there are 30 of them following one of their ships in the ocean. So would that work?
I mean, again, we have to develop the policy options based on what we know we're dealing with here, and we just don't know enough to make those to take those kinds of actions. But my goodness, we're going to do everything we can to find out, and we're going to share as much as we can. I understand it's frustrating for folks. Yeah. It's frustrating for us. We want to know as well.
What does President Biden say about it?
He also has tasked the team to look into this and to be energetic in doing it to try to get answers. He saw some of these images yesterday. He has talked to his team, including his top leaders, including at the Defense Department. And
have you called in like AI experts or said, like, why don't we ask Elon Musk what he thinks, or brought in outside experts?
We're working really hard right now inside in the interagency, and certainly supporting the FBI and DHS as they investigate this. And if we need to have additional conversations with people outside the lifelines, we certainly will do that. But I want to make sure I don't get ahead of the investigators and what they're doing.
It just seems weird. I mean, people, they're low. They fly fairly low, some of these. It just, I think, is amazing that the White House has no idea what's going on. I think that makes people feel really unsettled. In New Jersey, they sent out an intelligence bulletin, I should say, issued in December of 2024 with recommendations for encountering downed UAVs. And it says a downed or landed drone should not be approached. It says request hazardous materials response unit or local hazmat team. And then it says request the nearest bomb squad. Do you agree with those recommendations if one of these things comes into someone's house or lands in their yard, or they have to deal with it?
Yeah, look, I haven't seen that directive, but all that makes perfect sense to me as a former military person. If something like an aircraft of any kind lands in your backyard or close to you or your family, call the authorities. Don't approach it. You don't know what it is, and you don't know what kind of fuel might be on board. You absolutely should just call the authorities. Make sure you report it. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. You don't want to get hurt.
Okay. So, knowing a little bit of something about, shall we say, radio frequency, as I do, all right, I have a question. Has anybody been able to, and this is really more of a question, I guess, for the federal government, honestly, but has anybody been able to determine whether or not these things are being remotely controlled by seeing a radio frequency signal? And if not, or if so, why hasn't there been an attempt to jam one of them? Now, there are safe ways, or relatively safe ways, to bring one of these things down. It is entirely possible, unless, well, if it's an encrypted connection between the drone and the remote control that is using it, the only way to take care of that is to, of course, flood the airwaves with a competing signal such that of a significance significant strength, such that it overtakes whatever the signal is controlling these things. But even that's assuming whether or not these things actually are being controlled, remotely controlled elsewhere. However, you could sit and take a listen in the spectrum and see if you can track that signal in terms of where it's coming from. I just honestly think that these people, I mean, the government in particular, is not doing enough to try and figure this thing out. And there are some questions that are running around as to whether or not this is a foreign adversary who is doing this. Now, former officials are claiming that they believe it's Chinese drones. Congressman, I already told you, believes they are coming from Iran. These are questions that need to be asked. These are questions that need to be answered, I should say. And it's even gone so far as to some of the sightings that have been going on, they're being called car-sized objects flying over critical infrastructure and military assets in New Jersey. It's being suggested that they're coming in from the ocean. And as you just heard John Kirby talking about, there was a report of a Coast Guard cutter having up to 30 of these things following it. Okay. So I really believe that we need more answers to this. and that it likely is turning into, because let's be honest, if it was an American company, unless it was an American company that was developing something that was seriously top secret, which why they would be flying it why they'd be flying it over a populated area is beyond me, and not using someplace out in the desert, such as the famed Area 51 for its test flights. But in this particular case, I seriously believe that there is a very good possibility that these are from foreign sources. Much like that Chinese weather balloon, reported weather balloon, that was flown over the country not too long ago. Now, where they're coming from, that is anyone's guess at this point. But there is a lot more questions than answers here. And I don't believe that this administration is doing a very good job, to be honest with you, with regards to this kind of a scenario. They need to answer these questions. They need to get more. And here's another question that I have. If these things are being allowed to fly over populated areas without regard to what they might be doing there, that indicates a potential hole within our security system, within our security across the board, not necessarily a system in general, but a hole in our security that could be highly dangerous to the population. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I'm just asking what would be highly intelligent questions. If this is demonstrating a hole in our defense mechanisms, we need to plug that hole fairly quickly. This is not something that you want to leave wide open like this. Tying back to the whole idea of hackers getting into the system, hacking is more than just computer. There are people hackers too. That's known as phishing. And if this is truly a foreign entity, this poses a very great risk to the American populace. And this is something that we need to be concerned. Now, State Senator Joe Bramnick, who was also from New Jersey, has said, I have to be concerned because the size of these drones have been reported as big as an SUV. This is not some hobbyist playing a joke. Bramnick says that given these are sophisticated drones and the state government has no answers and the Homeland Security for the federal government today has no answers, he would not be surprised if a foreign adversary were behind them. Now, keep in mind, okay, we've always had the concept of unidentified flying objects. Things that our military folks and pilots and so on and so forth have seen unexplained in the skies. Could this just be an extension of those same types of sightings? This I don't know. And when you tie that with the idea, if you tie that with the idea that we as a government allowed a Chinese identified spy balloon across the United States with hardly, think about this. If people had not seen that thing outside of Billings, Montana, would the government have ever said anything to the American public? Would that have ever come or become public knowledge? And if so, if it wasn't going to be presented as public knowledge, how many things like this have actually occurred? How many things like this occur on a regular basis? How often does our law enforcement and intelligence agencies actually prevent actions on our soil. And the American public, again, like I said, in Men in Black, the important thing is that the American public does not know about it. Now, this isn't just happening here in the U.S., by the way, okay? It's also reportedly happening at U.S. military bases that are in the UK. That U.S. air forces in Europe and Africa have been deploying capabilities to track the drones, and they have not yet identified as a source. Now, that was coming from a Wall Street Journal reporting that an unidentified 20-foot-long drone traveling more than 100 miles an hour, this was back in October, by the way, that it was traveling more than 100 miles an hour. It breached Langley's Air Force Base, airspace, I should say, in December last year, 2023. 2 months prior, in October of 2023, 5 were spotted over the Energy Department's Nevada National Security site near Las Vegas. Now, an official who basically isn't necessarily talking, but he's essentially saying, and this is a former Trump administration national security official who was talking to a outlet called the Free Press. He's basically saying that it was China that flew over Langley, that 100-mile-an-hour breaching of Langley Air Force Base. He says it's probably China in Europe, and he guarantees that it's China over in New Jersey. Folks, we all know that China is gearing up to do something over in the Pacific. We also know that they have a habit of probing and learning about our defense systems and so on and so forth. I mean, that's the smart thing to do. But if these things are being allowed to continue the same way that known Chinese, quote, spy balloon was allowed to cross the United States, this is a serious breach in national security. And this is something where we need to have answers. We need to start looking at minimizing our risk in all of this. We don't have enough information to make a definitive answer as to whether or not these things pose a risk to the American public. I think personally that's just a comment, just like COVID was. It's over in China. No worries. You guys are going to be just fine. This could be the precursor to something that is incredibly disturbing, but also could be the precursor to something that is incredibly dangerous. So the former Trump national security official told the Free Press that these drones are not within the FAA airspace system, so it's not inconceivable and maybe not even a trivial risk that one of these drones is going to wind up hitting a helicopter or a small passenger plane. And apparently that's nearly happened already, according to this article, when the New Jersey State Police Colonel Patrick Callahan ordered a helicopter to fly over one of the drones. It suddenly switched off its lights. I already told you about this. In his professional opinion, he feared that it posed a danger to the helicopter and the 2 pilots, so he pulled them down and said he was no longer going to be pursuing any drones of that nature. Folks, the drones are starting to turn off their lights at night, according to one report. They're violating law that way. They're flying over restricted airspaces. They're flying over military installations. They're causing a frenzy with the public, folks. We need answers on these things. We need answers on what's going on here. We should be doing more things to analyze and decide whether or not these things are a danger to the public. And the federal government is not doing, or at least it isn't appearing to be doing, anything of that nature. We'll have to see what goes on in the near future with this, but I'm telling you, I have a feeling there is a purpose to these things. And I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think that they are basically that they are benign. I think there is a reason for them. I think there is a purpose for them. And I honestly believe that until somebody finds out, we have a big potential hole in our defenses and we need to plug it quickly and permanently. All right, folks, hat tip. I got to give a hat tip out to a longtime Whiskey Warrior P1. And yes, I am talking about the venerable, the smart, the intelligent, the wise Buddy Weiser. Buddy was telling us last night while I was talking to you about the border wall being auctioned off. Ooh, sorry. Smooth. He was telling us that Texas is already in the process of buying up those pieces of border wall that are being auctioned off by Joe Biden, and they're planning on returning it to Trump. Here in Red State, that's the plan. Texas heard that the Biden administration was auctioning off parts of the border wall, so they decided to grab their little paddle and a fist full of cash and get to bidding. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick made the announcement during an appearance with Fox News host Laura Ingraham on Thursday night. He said, "I don't know if you've heard the latest today, Laura, but Joe Biden is now hauling off the border wall that's been lying down for years, and he wants to auction it off starting at $5 a piece. Message to the White House right now," he added, "I will bid on that wall, on all of that wall, and we will buy it in Texas, and we're going to give it to Donald Trump." So it was, again, the video of the Daily Wire, by the Daily Wire that was posted, showing numerous flatbed trucks hauling away the unused sections of the border wall near Tucson, Arizona. Okay. The outlet wrote that the Biden administration is using its final weeks to haul a massive amount of border wall materials away from the southern border to be sold off at a government auction in an apparent effort to hinder President-elect Donald Trump's efforts to secure the border. So, yeah. So there you go. Oh, by the way, here's the screenshot from govplanet.com, which is a government surplus auction site. And you can see that they have these border wall pieces that are being auctioned off for starting at, $5. Yeah. Anyway. So Texas is going ahead and jumping on all of that and basically taking it back. God bless Texas. That's all I got to say with that. Well, one other thing occurred, or one other article showed up. You recall, and this isn't much of a segue, but I'm going to go ahead and use it anyway. You'll recall that we were talking about, in terms of the border wall, melting it down, recycling it, and they would get pennies on the dollar for it and so on and so forth. And of course, I also made the comment about how recycling on this program, how recycling isn't exactly what a lot of people think it is, that much of the stuff that goes off to the recycling plants that you, in terms of if you are a green loving person, look at it and go, hey, I'm doing stuff to help the planet. Well, John Stossel who is I would consider to be a good investigative reporter. He has put out several different reports disputing a lot of different things, and he's now disputing the scam, quote unquote, of recycling. Okay? Right here. John Stossel blows the lid off the scam that is recycling. So he's back to ruining your preconceived notions of things and also putting out some very inconvenient truths. In fact, let's go ahead and take a listen to the first few minutes of this newly released video by John Stossel.
Do you recycle?
For sure, absolutely.
Absolutely, everything I possibly can.
For decades, we've been told.
Recycle America, don't just throw it all away.
Because recycling will save the planet.
You're saving the earth.
And that's what people believe.
We have to do it for the kids, for the next generation.
This will all be back on the shelf as a cracker or cereal box in about 4 to 5 weeks.
This recycling company is run by Lynn Hoffman.
If we're not using recycled paper and cardboard, we're cutting down more trees.
Recycling paper and cardboard does save trees. Recycling aluminum does save energy. But most of the other stuff is impractical to recycle.
That's right.
This is material that came in to the recycling facility from people's recycling carts and is going to leave as trash.
Huge amounts of what people send to her recycling plant will never be recycled. The worst is plastic, which for years has been marked with the recycling symbol.
We see stuff like this all the time. Recycling arrows on it. Please recycle. It's not recyclable.
Even worse, plastic bags clog the recycling machines.
You have to climb in for a couple hours every day and cut them out with the box cutter.
But people think most of our plastic is recycled.
Yeah, I do think so. Is it not? You're going to tell me it's not? That's the trick?
The reality is that
The amount of plastic actually recycled is around 5%.
Wow. I figured there was something coming, but I'm shocked right now. I didn't know.
It's sad.
all my life I've heard about how important it is to recycle.
It's not.
Science writer John Tierney debunked recycling claims years ago. His New York Times Magazine story, Recycling is Garbage, set a record for Times hate mail. And yet, what you said is still true?
It's even more true today. In fact, the economics have just gotten worse.
Now, my city would save more than $300 million a year if it just stopped recycling.
Recycling is an industry that's using increasingly expensive labor to produce materials that are worth less and less.
Because it's not worth recycling here, much is shipped overseas to countries like Malaysia, where it's just piled up.
A vast field of plastic 2 stories high.
Some of it from America.
See if we can look on the back here. Marysville, Ohio. Look, Walmart bag.
They just dump here and then they burn it.
That pollutes even more. And what they don't burn, they sometimes dump in the ocean.
1 garbage truck of plastic is dumped in the sea every minute.
Barely any of that plastic comes from American shores. So,
if you care about saving Flipper, you should put your plastic bottle in the garbage.
The garbage? But then it would go to a landfill. And aren't we running out of space for landfills?
I'm sure we are.
People believe that because for years the media said,
we've about run out of places to throw away our throwaways.
They think that because years ago there was so much publicity about this barge.
A symbol of this country's growing problems with trash.
The barge traveled thousands of miles looking for a place to dump its load. But it wasn't because there wasn't room. States turned this barge away because alarmist media scared people about what it contained.
There could be infectious waste.
Dripping brown ooze of possibly infectious material.
We don't know what kind of tropical vermin is in that garbage.
The EPA later found it was normal garbage. And landfills had plenty of room for it. Today they have more space than we'll ever need.
All right. So I just wanted to show you that because, again, just pointing out. Now, keep in mind, okay, folks, that this doesn't mean that recycling isn't beneficial in certain cases. As John Stossel kind of pointed out, aluminum, glass, and paper, definitely are recyclable. But here's where the thing kind of breaks down, and that is even here in this state, we actually get charged by using plastic bags because there is an attempt to keep us from using those plastic bags. And all it is just, it's a big boondoggle. That's all it is. It's all it is. Now, reusing plastic bags over and over again, oftentimes that's perfect. That's great. But the reality of it is that the idea of recycling, as I pointed out on this program, it's very, very hard to actually do this in a profitable manner. And therefore, not very many people are actually doing it in a profitable manner. And in fact, I've been told by a couple different people, a couple different folks on my at my local trash company that if you throw away a plastic bottle with the top on it, because they don't take the tops, if you throw away those plastic bottles with tops on it, all they do is they just toss it in the garbage. Recycling is not what it's purported to be, much like a lot of other things that the mainstream media don't want you to know about. All right, really quickly, I have a question of the week. Let's go ahead and get to that before I take off for the night. Tonight's question of the week is sort of a rehash of another topic or another question of the week that we had. And this one came in, of course, from Buddy Weiser. He says, "Good day to you, my interweb friend. I have a question for you, and here it is. How can a pardon be given to someone before they are charged, tried, and convicted of a crime or illegal act first? Where can I read about this procedure? I never saw it used on Perry Mason or Judge Judy." All right. Well, really quick, yes, especially when you're dealing with the presidential pardon in particular, the president can pardon someone even though they have not been charged. They can preemptively pardon somebody. And believe it or not, there actually is a organization, part of the Justice Department, the Office of the Pardon Attorney. There's actually an Office of a Pardon Attorney. And as I'll show you here, if you look on their website, this is essentially what they say in terms of the legal cases. And this has been upheld by the Supreme Court, by the way. The question is asked, can the president pardon someone before they are indicted, convicted, or sentenced for a federal offense against the United States? And it says, it would be highly unusual. Again, it's not something normal. But there have been a few cases where people who had not been charged with a crime were pardoned. And that's including President Gerald Ford's pardon of President Richard Nixon after Watergate, President Jimmy Carter pardoning of Vietnam draft dodgers, and President George H.W. Bush's pardon of Caspar Weinberger. President Donald Trump also pardoned Joseph Arpaio, who you'll recall is the sheriff of Arizona, and others after they were charged and convicted, but prior to sentencing. That's normal. That is normal. So, yeah, it is possible. It is the president's pardon power isn't very well defined, to be honest with you, and so preemptive pardons. But apparently, the thought process is that you can't pardon somebody for a future crime. So because of that, a crime actually has to have been committed first, which means that if somebody is pardoned of a crime, but they haven't been charged with it, that essentially means that they know they did something wrong and they're being pardoned for it ahead of time before they even get charged with it, which tells you that they are guilty. So in other words, what that means is Joe has pardoned his son Hunter for crimes that he hasn't been charged with because of the fact that he knows that he's guilty. Joe Biden knows that Hunter Biden is guilty of crimes against the United States and has pardoned him for it for that almost 11-year period starting in 2014. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, please head on over to Rumble. Excuse me, rumble.com. Get yourself an account. Getting an account is free. Once you are there and signed in, search up the American Perspective channel and hit that green follow button to make sure that you get notified every time I go live. Also, too, don't forget to hit those thumbs up and likes on their way out. To make sure that you elevate my videos across the board. That means on Facebook, X, YouTube, and of course the aforementioned Rumble. We will see you on Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and I will see you on Monday. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.